Yeah. I got mine
I'm
from the
surprised you
university.
didn't go to University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point for that. That's where all the paper
The
people go.
I didn't know about Stevens Point. I actually I got like this. I went in for the college interview, and he talked me into coming in to visit the College of Forestry, and then he like slid this piece of paper across the table to me and my dad, and he says like, well, you know, we talked about this, and fisheries and wildlife, you might get a job if you're one of the 3 people who graduate each year, and it pays like $8,000 a year. Or you could do recreational resource management, or yeah, you know, there's this thing. It just might suit your academic background. It's called paper engineering. Everybody graduates and gets a with that degree gets a job, and that pays like $30,000 a year. And I felt my dad like shift. And he goes, "Oh, and if you have a B average or above, everybody has a scholarship." And and I was just like, "Oh, I guess I'm going to enroll with paper science."
Nice.
So yeah, I am a paper geek too. But I didn't know that I worked one summer in a paper mill. You worked one summer in a paper
I
mill.
worked a
So
few summers in a paper mill, which kept me in college because it was hot
so
and messy.
so my internship was in Stevens Point actually.
Oh, there
I
you
worked
go.
for Nina Papers.
That's where my undergrad, I got my dietetics undergrad in Stevens Point.
Ah,
Yeah.
okay. Okay. I
Yeah.
didn't know our connections. That's
Yeah.
great.
We got a lot of
So
connections.
yeah. I suppose we should talk about what we're here for, right?
You bet.
So hey everyone, SimplyThick John here. This is the show where we talk about dysphagia and IDDSI and all that kind of stuff without trying to sound too sciencey and too technical. We want to just have a good conversation, talk about IDDSI and IDDSI implementation. And if you don't know, IDDSI is the International Dysphagia Diet Standardization Initiative. I always assume people know that, but I should say it out loud every now and then. So this week, I have Dr. Shelley Sonnentag with me. Did I say that right?
You did.
And she was one of the featured speakers at the IDDSI symposium a couple weeks ago, and that's where I was like, you know, people on LinkedIn really need to hear from you. You are the Chief Nursing Officer for Real Property Health Facilities. You direct the Executive QAPI program and company policy development. You support clinical nutritional service operations for all of the RPHF skilled nursing and residential care facilities. You're an IDDSI champion. You did full implementation throughout the company in 2019. So that makes you an early adopter. I don't know if you get like a special badge for that. And you have a whole bunch of initials that I'm not going to read, but suffice it to say, you're a doctor of nursing,
Yep.
and she was a gopher at the University of Minnesota, like I was. And if you just tuned in, you heard out we both worked in paper mills in college, so
Yes, we
we got
did.
that in common as well. So let's just jump into it, and why don't you share with everyone kind of like a quick overview of your IDDSI implementation process? You know, just
Yeah.
2 minutes.
So I went to a convention in late 2017. The Wisconsin Department of Health put it on. It's called the Focus Conference.
Okay.
And there was a session there that was called IDDSI, you know, the new standard. And it's the first I had heard about it in 2017. So I'm on listservs. I'm in group professional organizations. I just hadn't been connected with that in Wisconsin yet. So I remember sitting through the session. I learned, you know, a whirlwind of things that day in a 90-minute session, and even through testing of the liquids and testing of the solids and, you know, everything like that. And I thought, well, this is going to be fantastic, but it's going to be a lot of work. So I remember leaving that meeting and calling our food vendor, the dietitian that we work with. And I said, have you heard of it? Are we going to do it? Like, are you going to do it? Are you going to help me do it? And she goes, I'm sure we have to do it. So we might as well start. And so her and I spent the next several months really digging into the IDDSI.org website and learning everything we could about it. And then our food vendors, their support was incredible with helping with standardized menus and recipes and all the different levels of recipes. and helping to train. And then, so we did a rollout, we did an implementation packet from the IDDSI.org website, and we planned it all out, and we were able to go live April of 2019. And in May of 2019 was the first mention of that being the standard, the only recognized standard. And then by 2021, the American Dietetics Association, the Speech Language Hearing, they all adopted it as the standard in 2021. So here we are in 2025, and COVID, I think, threw a wrench in a lot of things in the world, but, and I know some places were planning implementation, but put it on hold during COVID, but things are kind of lagging now a little bit behind. Other countries, I think, are far ahead of us. So we need to get rolling here, and we need to adopt this standard. And now is the time. So, the surveyors for the nursing homes, the long-term care world, have been talking about it, in Wisconsin for 8 years. And so I know they're getting closer to discussing actually regulating towards in enforcing the standard. One of the things I always like to talk about is wound care, because if you don't follow the standard of care for taking care of a resident with a wound, it's the first thing that they'll write on your statement of deficiency. They were doing XYZ, and that's not a standard of care. Well, if IDDSI is the only internationally recognized standard of care for dysphagia diets, I don't see how any provider can say, oh, I don't think I'm going to do it.
That's been a fascinating part of the whole thing for me. Not really understanding the regulatory framework, because I come at it as a supplier, obviously.
Right.
But I know that when we started doing some stuff with IDDSI in the US, that there was a Wisconsin regulator who was actively, talking to us about this. And I know
Yes.
at both IDDSI festivals in the US I've gone to, we've had people with a regulatory background or who are active regulators get up and say, the NDD is not a standard of care.
Right.
And that should be terrifying to everybody, because I thought the presentation could just stop right there. If it's not the standard of care, then how can you be using it?
Exactly.
And that's just my opinion. But when the regulators are saying it, and when you look at the definitions of standard of care, it becomes pretty clear pretty quick that IDDSI is the standard of care. It's endorsed by the major organizations. It's evidence-backed. It's in the literature. It's global. So it's always felt to me like, well, you really should be doing this. It doesn't look good if you're going to say, well, no, we do our own diet, or we use the old diet. We use the old standards.
Well, they used to put, Maalox in wounds and dry them out with a heat lamp too. I don't think you could get away with that anymore. They found moist wound care is the way, the standard for healing a wound. This dysphagia diet is far superior, I feel, to the NDD diets, because of the science and the interprofessional collaboration that went into this to set it up. And I always, I kind of cringe a little bit when I hear, oh, our building is going to implement it, but we're going to do it a little different. We're going to let this level have bread. And it's like, okay, bread is the number one item that people choke on. Residents in the nursing home setting, especially, they don't have a lot of saliva production. They're on a lot of medications that dry out their saliva, their ability to make saliva. And so when they do take a bite of a bun and they're chewing it and it's not mixing with a lot of saliva, and they got the reflex to already swallow it down, it gets lodged. And it is the number one choking hazard in the elderly. So, and I know you and I had talked about it in my, 31-year career already doing what I've been doing. We've had, 2 resident, choking episodes, where one was a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I absolutely cannot. I don't sleep at night because of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches in nursing homes. And the grilled cheese sandwich was the second. So they're very, the reason that IDDSI set these diets up the way they did is because of
And
science.
just to be clear, both of those residents passed away, correct?
Yes, they did.
So you're not just talking about a little choke, or
Yeah.
these were extreme events that scarred everybody in the facility.
Mhm.
So yeah,
And
it's
it wasn't for lack of assessment and appropriate diet, but there are things such as resident rights as well, which
yeah,
this becomes, one of our biggest hurdles, is when a resident just says, you can prescribe me, a pureed level 4 with level 3 extremely thick liquids, but I'm going to eat that cheeseburger from McDonald's. And they
yeah,
know what the risk is. And if they choose to do that, and I mean, our staff has to be on standby, trained in the Heimlich. We even have LifeVac. I don't know if you're familiar with
not
LifeVacs,
me.
but it's a little device that you can buy. It looks like a CPR mask with a plunger. And if we have a bariatric resident or somebody we can't get our arms around, and we can't do the Heimlich, or we can't get them down on the floor to even do, abdominal thrusts, we pull out this LifeVac for $75. It gives you that one last shot at, let's try to get this out. So
Yeah,
our company, even after doing everything right, and these were in the remote past, it hasn't happened in a long time, knock on wood. But yeah, the LifeVac was something that we had implemented just as that last chance type thing. But I feel since the implementation of IDDSI and how much more based on science. I mean, why is a level 6 15 millimeters for an adult? Why is that the bite size piece? Well, that's because, your esophagus is this big. And so a 15 millimeter piece will not block it. So
yep.
everything that they do is based on the science. Everything
It's
you do is based on the science, for sure.
well, so I know that IDDSI gets kind of that bad rap because of bread, and it's not like they just decided, oh, we're going to pick on bread. They went and looked at coroner's reports,
Mhm.
and they found that bread was a very, very, very common part of all of these coroner reports. And even I've gone over the years. I've gone to the CDC database. I, the name escapes me right now, but you can look up from death certificates causes of
Mhm.
death, and if you put in dysphagia and asphyxiation from food, and you use and not or and, it comes out to, I don't know, roughly 100 to 120 cases a year. And so that means that, every few days in the US, there's somebody who's got dysphagia that's asphyxiating on their food and passing away,
Mhm.
because that's on their death certificate. And so, it has to be more than that. So with these dysphagia diets, trying to get it where, you're going to be eating less food that gives less chance of choking is a very good thing. And it's not like they just made it up.
Yeah,
They came up with this and they tried to have the science.
it's probably a lot more because a lot of times we are successful at getting it out.
Mhm.
The Heimlich does work, or even if EMTs get there and they are able to successfully retrieve that and the resident ends up going to the hospital, then they can develop aspiration pneumonia and a host of other issues, or, even it's even hard on them from a cardiac standpoint. And, the choking incident can absolutely be related, but it might not make it as the cause finally on the
Right.
death
Right.
certificate. So, yeah.
Well, I think we all understand that risk pyramid, right? Like for every death, there's, whatever, 5 near misses, and then there's 10 almost.
Yeah.
There's that pyramid of risk where um, different, it could have ended badly, but it didn't.
Right.
Um, so it, I I was happy with just being able to have a discussion about thickness where it didn't come down to people's opinions. That's why I fell in love with IDDSI. But when you start getting into these nuances and the safety factors and things like that, it's not really a surprise to me that the professional organizations have endorsed it the way they have.
No,
And we've
like I
switched.
said, I had a Wisconsin surveyor ask me what my opinion was of it. What did I think about it when because I've spoken on it a few times now, and I said to me, it makes all the sense in the world. It's so much more clear. It's so much more objective. It takes out that guesswork. It takes out, I mean, in the NDD world, I remember giving, the mechanical soft meats on a full bun, and they would eat a sloppy Joe, like just like that.
Mm-hmm.
And, now it's with the minced and moist and just the different textures, it makes so much more sense. I think the coughing, the difficulties for those residents that have had post-stroke residents or anybody that does have those swallowing issues. It has just been, I think, a great thing for our company to have switched to. And again, it's coming. So California, the surveyor spoke at our IDDSI symposium there, and they said, we're going to use this calendar year to check out your implementation plan, but we're going to start regulatorily enforcing this January 1st, 2026. And California's been a little bit ahead of the game in the U.S. Yep. Wisconsin, you talked about the regulator there that has been, a part of IDDSI for a while, Vicki Bergquist, and she, retired. And I did speak with her at the Miami IDDSI symposium, and I did say, hey, I'm all about it and I'm going to keep it going. And she's like, oh, good. Now I can retire. So that was great. But, I have some facilities in Indiana, and a lot of the Indiana, they don't even know what IDDSI is yet. They've not even heard of that. And a lot of, one of my buildings is in Montana, and they are just probably because there's a lot of Californians in Montana, but they're starting to, do the IDDSI training and in some of the discussions there. But I do think Wisconsin, since the surveyors have been part of, talking about it now and educating all of the survey field for 8 years, and Vicki Bergquist trained all of the surveyors before she did retire. Mm-hmm. I think that, I know that the surveyors here in Wisconsin are going to be, if you have an issue, if they're doing a dining room observation and there's a resident that's coughing and sputtering, or they look at a tray that says pureed, but there's chunks on it, those texture and consistency issues, all of those things, they're going to, they did say that they would be looking then with more scrutiny what your process is, what standard you're following. And just because CMS, Appendix PP are our federal regulations, just because Appendix PP doesn't exactly say IDDSI anywhere in the print, it does say in multiple spots in Appendix PP, you do have to follow current recognized professional standards of practice.
Absolutely. So after Vicki's presentation last year, I actually wrote a blog post where I went in and I read Appendix PP. And I mean, it's like, I'm going to say there's more than 30 times where it says like, standards of care or current practice, and it's written that way specifically because, like you pointed out, with wound care, as standards change and evolve, they don't have to go and change Appendix PP. It stays the same because they're just saying, look, you have to be up on your current practice.
Yeah.
And what's the current practice? And you look around and you go, well, NDD, the organization that published it, is the American Dietetic Association. They changed their name to the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. They no longer publish it. They no longer update it. They no longer support it, and they've moved to IDDSI. So you're really on shaky ground if you try to say, well, here's this other standard. And when the organization that published it, the organization that wrote it, the organization that supported it, no longer supports it.
Yep.
And they've moved on to IDDSI. So it's going to get scary for people if they have not started down this path.
I don't know how you're going to legally support not following it. Let's just say, sadly, you do have a choking episode.
Yep.
And a resident passes and family is upset and you end up in some kind of a lawsuit situation. How are you going to defend not following a standard of practice? I don't know.
I don't know. Oh, well, the other people around here, they don't do that either. That's not what the regulation says. The regulation says what's the current standard of practice. So it's out there, and it's. I do like, or I do find it fascinating that you get to see 3 different regulatory environments with your buildings, and just seeing how that impacts your business in general, but hearing how you have the different experiences, so you can like start to see the reeds moving or whatever.
You bet. Yeah.
But Wisconsin has been, they haven't announced they're going to yet, but you feel it's coming.
Well, so it focused the same convention where I heard about it in 2017. I spoke at last year on IDDSI at that conference. And there was a panel of our top Department of Health and Health Services surveyors and the state, the leads. And they talked about all the immediate jeopardy citations that were happening in the state. And for some reason, there were a couple areas that we had to worry about. New, kind of, I mean, I won't say new, because of course, these are always issues, but 2 that came up this last time on this panel were hot liquid burns assessments, hot liquid assessments that need to be done on residents, and then choking, and that how choking has kind of risen up the charts in the state of Wisconsin as one of the lead causes of immediate jeopardies. And I just thought, geez, that's crazy. But if you talk to any nursing home operator that went through COVID, our staff, we turned over quite a bit of staff. It was very difficult. It was one of the hardest things, I've been through in my entire, 31-year career. And it was hard on even the dietary departments because there were crisis times during that whole COVID experience where we were having to pull a dietary person and say, okay, well, we're going to need you to help now in this fashion and in this fashion. And they're in the kitchen sometimes because they didn't want to be a nursing assistant. They didn't want to have to, have that level of personal care and things that had to happen. And so we ended up turning over, some dietary staff. And, one of the biggest, I say, obstacles with IDDSI is you get everybody trained, everybody has that level of knowledge, great orientation, great training, great visual aids in your kitchen, everybody knows what they're doing, and then you turn somebody over. And then it starts all over again. So it does seem like the movie Groundhog's Day. Sometimes you're in that constant training mode. And, if you start with really good orientation and you can get through that training mode, I mean, you're good. That's half the battle right there. But
is that now part of your onboarding process, or how do you bring somebody in and just bring them up to speed with IDDSI?
We start, I mean, because your average American has no idea what IDDSI is unless they themselves have a loved one who's had a stroke or something that's happened, maybe esophageal cancer or tongue cancer or something like that causes them to need this modified diet and modified liquids. So we find when we do hire somebody that's coming into work as a dietary aide or cook, we have to start with, okay, well, that some residents need, pureed food. They can't chew chunks, and it's easier for them to chew and swallow. Well, this is IDDSI. This is what this is called. But I know when you're going through and talking about the framework and what the framework looks like and how it so logically lines up and makes sense, that this level 7 that's up here is the full piece of food. And then as I chew, it goes all the way down to this, as it mixes with my saliva and my chewing mechanism, it goes all the way down this framework. And like a light bulb goes on, and that makes sense. And so when you train the different levels, but it is a never-ending thing. We have them watch a video first. We have them go through training materials. I know even IDDSI.org has training materials already built into their website. So there's no need to recreate the wheel here. And then the food vendors like yourself. I mean, our staff you guys, I think SimplyThick did yourself, I think you did, you had cameras that were over a work table and you live streamed this is how we do extremely thick stock. This is how we make ground beef for a level 5. This is how we would thicken this. And we had our staff all watch even those SimplyThick live education modules. And your food vendors, our food vendor here, we just did a fantastic session with, I think we talked about how everybody got these kits mailed out to them with a whole bunch of stuff. And I think if you are in that implementation stage, you need to reach out to your vendors. SimplyThick for sure. Your cutting boards, those are laying all over the kitchen. And this is the reason. You got a surveyor that comes in and is talking to a staff that maybe has only been there for a week, and she has been trained, but she's so nervous. She's shaking in her boots, and they're like, well, what size are you making, this level 6? And she's like, oh, I don't know. I'm like, go over to the cutting board, level 6, 5, 4, all on there with the food tests that you need to do and the sizes, it can guide you. And the same with the big framework, dietary poster, like it's all there. Just always go back and reference that. Anytime you have a question, whether surveyors are asking you or you just need to know on a Friday afternoon. So those things through the vendors help.
When you were talking about your IDDSI implementation process, I did want to go back and just kind of highlight for people to say, what you said was you and your food vendor in a few months using the resources on the IDDSI website figured it out.
Yep.
And I think it was was it 18 months or 2 years between when you first heard about IDDSI and when you went live?
So yeah, we heard about it November of 2017 and we went live April of 2019. So we basically took the whole calendar. We didn't work on it over Christmas that first year, but once January hit, we kind of pulled all of our stuff together. It took that calendar year because like I think we were the first nursing home company that I know of in all 3 of our states that we operate in that switched over. And I'm so glad I did it when I did.
So using just 2017, 2018 resources, you were able to do that.
Right.
And nowadays there's so much more.
There's a ton
and people
more.
know more, and your food service vendors, you're not calling them up and you're not the first one that's done this.
Nope.
I think you said Martin Brothers was,
any building now could very easily, if you dedicate some time to it, you could very easily have an implementation plan in 3 months, and you could have all the training done. I wrote a letter for all of our, providers, our resident representatives, resident staff, explaining what IDDSI was, put a copy of the framework in it, said if you have any questions, call me, call the facility, send me an email. We gave them a lot of opportunities to ask questions. So then we had to do which diet should they be on, from NDD over to which level, the crosswalk, I guess. But a lot of individual assessment, and, that's the big thing, individualized assessment, because it's not a prescriptive, it's a descriptive diet. But those things were the cook training, which like I said, our staff watched the SimplyThick, we attended training sessions, live training sessions from SimplyThick, and that was very helpful. And I think even going to the IDDSI symposium in California, I mean, you were there, you saw how fantastic the chefs were there. I mean, some of the all those little the little things that they do that you can't figure out, like, this is how we make our level 6 noodle in the Vitamix, not in the, Roboku. Those things that's what makes that IDDSI symposium fantastic to go to, because you learn a lot of the little tricks of the trade when you're there, things that that aren't sitting on a website for you, not in like, hey, this is the best way to do this. That is blood, sweat, and tears that goes into that, right? Like, this, you do your SimplyThick John on TikTok, and you're mixing up the margarita. thickened residents that need thickened liquids can still have a cocktail, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, those guys, like they came around last year and they're like, oh yeah, we do it all with Vitamix. And I was like, you can't do that with Vitamix. And then they made some YouTube videos and I watched them and I'm like, well, I guess you can. And then I was in their kitchen watching them do it. And yeah, they figured out how to do it with the Vitamix. And I was like, okay, I
And
got to give them
I
credit.
talked to him about the same thing when I was there, and it makes sense if you think about it. When I put everything into a regular food processor and I'm trying to keep it in its most natural state and maybe not add a bunch of liquid, a lot of times it does come out a little pasty, a little too
Yep.
thick, and I can't do my spoon plot test, and it does, it'll stick to it, it doesn't pass. But in the Vitamix, you do have to add enough liquid to make that process so smooth.
Yep.
That they said what their findings were when they used the Vitamix, more of their foods passed the food tests than if they tried to just use the processor. And I thought, that makes sense. It just, yeah.
The more I do this, the more I found out that we have some tips, techniques, and tricks that have worked for us, but by no means are they the only ones. And I think in November, I'm going to do a webinar with a pureed bread company, Rubicon. We're going to get together and we're going to do pureed Thanksgiving. And I'm going to handle the meats and the veggies and stuff. And I'm like, you can do all the breads. It's fine. Let's get together and let's join forces and show people, what a pureed Thanksgiving could be.
That sounds fantastic, because even part of the training, that I showed you this kid on, they had a Hormel Lions product that was their bread mix.
Yep.
And they made a roast turkey stuffing with the bread mix for the level 4, 5s, and 6s that looked on a plate like it was regular stuffing.
Wow.
So, I mean, it's it takes time, it takes finesse, it's trial and error. And, like Chef David Cruz said in California, it takes a lot of butter.
A lot of butter.
So, I mean, there's that. So I don't know. That's just a plug for if they have another US symposium next year. We don't know where that will be yet, but I've been to both so far. We just did number 2, and
I think what I'm hearing is next year will probably be a virtual one, so that they can get more, and then in 2027 it'll be live and in person again. Okay. I think that's what I'm hearing, but
I put in a vote for the Midwest to get that next one, but they said, oh, I don't know, these people like to fly into the coasts. And I said, well, so do I, but
yeah, we'll see.
We need the Midwest needs to be represented there.
Exactly. So, yeah, I'd love to see one in the Midwest. I had actually, when I first started thinking about it, I was like, what you don't need is one big festival. You just need like a traveling road show and go around to six cities around the country every other month and then just get everybody trained. But that never got any wheels. And it would be a heck of a lot of work. I think we've covered everything we were planning. Oh, I know what I wanted to ask you. What benefits have you seen since you implemented IDDSI versus NDD? Do you see a staff training, resident better food, or people eating more, drinking more?
I think training on the NDD was kind of more limited to the person running the kitchen. And then it was the cook showing them how to just do ground meats and how to puree things in the Roboku. And now with how formalized IDDSI is and all the training resources and tools and educational materials, it is literally made the dietary departments way more competent, just without anybody having to even create those resources other than IDDSI. I mean, they're there. And so you can pull those resources in and you can do all of your formal training with their resources and their videos and their app. They even have an IDDSI app where everything pretty much from the website is even on that app. And you know how everybody has their cell phones, anywhere. And a lot of kitchens have an iPad. And so you can load that IDDSI app right on an iPad in your kitchen. And they can see any of the resources on there as well and watch videos. So Yeah, I think that, and then the clarity. It took out a lot of subjectivity. Now, don't get me wrong, we're still doing individualized resident assessment
Right.
because there are some residents that they have different reasons for chewing or swallowing issues. Everybody's different, and so if they sit side by side with that speech therapist and they are doing a like a mixed consistency test, can they have the soup with the chunks in it and the thin liquids, and still be a level 6 or a level 7 EC? This person might be able to do that. Or, my favorite, may have soft breads and cakes. If that's defined for a person, like, they can't handle a full bun, but if you cut the crust off of this white bread, and they have one slice, this way, then they can have this. Like, that's black and white individual resident assessment. So I see that a lot more of the guesswork has been taken out, and it's much more objective and black and white. So.
And what I'm seeing, or what I'm really feeling these days, is that because there's standards, because there's testing methods, and there's goals for people to shoot for, that the creativity of the cooking staff and the chefs and they're able to know what they're targeting. Like, it isn't just, oh, well, this is my puree, or, now there's standards to reach to, and some of the dishes and things you see if you're looking around LinkedIn or going to conferences or stuff, they're just amazing, and
They are amazing.
I'll eat them.
I mean, at the IDDSI symposium, again, I'll bring it up again, the tofu chocolate truffles. I mean, just creative and delicious. And you wouldn't, if you were a level 4, 5, 6, I mean, any human enjoyed those truffles, and you wouldn't have known that is a prepared food for somebody with dysphagia. So.
I know.
I just wanted to show, I know this is yours, but I said these are literally everywhere in our kitchens. So, these are the ones that will put a plug in for you. Yeah. They're available on the SimplyThick website, y'all.
One of our sales reps just came to me and said, I'm training people on IDDSI. I think something like this would be really helpful for kitchen staff. Can we do it? And I said, yeah, let's do it. And I think I looked at the number. I just happened to be looking at the numbers today, and I think that we've shipped like 20,000 of them.
Isn't that amazing?
It's crazy to me that there's been that kind of demand and that many people want them.
Have you had to do them in different languages yet?
No, no.
Hey, you got another hole.
But yeah, I think I've been asked for them in Spanish, and so I've just gotten back in touch with our Latin American Spanish translator.
So I actually could use some in Spanish. Yeah, we have a facility in Kenosha, and we have some dietary staff that would be wonderful for.
Okay, I'll have to get Rosanna on that.
Yeah, do that.
Well, Shelly, I have really enjoyed this conversation, and I hope everyone else did. This was kind of fabulous to hear from somebody who's an early adopter and has lots of experience and is well recognized as well for, it is kind of funny, right? In 2017, you went there and it's the first time you ever heard of IDDSI, and now this year you were a speaker on a panel at that same conference about IDDSI.
Yeah, and the dietitian that I worked with to set our whole company up, she's speaking actually this week at the ANFP on IDDSI as well. So it's, it's about when you I mean, Maya Angelou says, right, we do the best we can do. When we know better, we do better. And that's what this is. Like, we know better now, and now we need to do better. So that's why we're at this juncture, and we need to push it through. So
that's a perfect closing.
And also thank you. Thank you for the SimplyThick John crack tickets. That made going to California completely worth it right there for me.
My staff had so much fun when we got that picture drawn. They're like, oh, we're going to put it on this. We're going to put it on that. We're going to put it on. Yep. Those crack gibbets are
fantastic.
Anyway, I think we'll end it there. And folks, please check back. We should have another episode in about 2 weeks. That's kind of the pace we're on. And I love these conversations, and I'm so happy to share them with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.